On. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is our third fireside chat in the series. I don't know how many there will be in the series, but this is my second time hosting. New guest today, Chris Buckman, who's a friend, former client, current client, and founding managing director of Endeavour Canada. I'm going to spend a couple minutes introducing myself and then pass it over to Chris so he can do his own intro. And then we're going to talk today really about accelerating growth. And the theme is going to be transitions. So transition from startup to revenue generating business to really taking things to the next level from a business and corporate perspective, ultimately culminating in contemplation of going public. Would encourage everyone to submit any questions that you may have in the chat. Inappropriate questions are always the best, so I encourage those too. Chris, we're not on the couch this time. And so this is a transition for us. We've moved to the big boy chairs. Yeah. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. We have done this kind of thing before, so our friends who were organizing this kept encouraging us to prepare. We've done no preparation whatsoever. We're winging it today, as we do always. Yep. And so I think the best part of today is going to be the war stories and things that come up as we move through. You've taken a number of businesses from startup phase right to exit. And so interested to hear some of those stories. And you're now advising and really facilitating businesses to accelerate their growth. So would really like to hear about what you're doing now and what you see in the marketplace at this point in time. So again, with the theme of transitions, my name is Chris Wolfenberg, partner at Denton's in the corporate group in Calgary. I just moved to Denton's from another national firm last August. Part of the reason for the move was to accelerate and support the growth of my clients, not just in Canada and not just in the tech space, but internationally as well. Larger platform and better able to service client needs. I've been involved in the tech space and the startup space particularly, and encouraging companies as they grow to seek out the resources they need. One of the resources that is available to them as they hit a certain stage of growth is Endeavour Canada. And so Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you are now?
Yeah, well, welcome everyone. And Chris, thanks for having me, and Denton's for hosting this. Fantastic. Good to be back with the Death Star. I see it's back put together. Kind of a funny story, but I was in here a couple of times and actually bumped it, and I looked at it, I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm figuring out how to put this back together. So it's I don't know
who put it back together.
I don't know. It's the mystery. I actually wish there was a camera in here to figure out actually who fixed it, but it is back together, so that's great. But
yeah, I should say we're at Mob Squad today. Our last chat was at our boardroom in Toronto, and Mob Squad. Maybe you can give a shout out and talk
great,
a little bit about that too.
To see things opening up here in Calgary, and the Mob Squad Cafe is open to the public Monday to Friday now, 8 to 5. Amazing floor here of amenities and the two buildings, 2 towers of the Edison. Some great tech and entrepreneurs here too. So come on up 21st floor to the Mob Squad and grab a good coffee and some good social in conversations as well.
So Endeavour Canada, you just moved 6 months ago, maybe?
It's a year coming up. Yeah.
We're getting old.
So actually, yeah, a little bit on my background, but she's coming up 22 years in the career side of things after hockey. Was an entrepreneur by trait. I think my father, true and true, growing up in small town BC, took some of his advice and jumped in early to the oil fields, got involved in some startups there, some executive positions, transitioned after that actually to become a venture capitalist. Had 4 or 5 years there and really enjoyed that time and the experience there. And Chris and I have done some different things together on the business side and some angel investing. And really excited now to have this opportunity to kind of take both sides of the table here as a venture capitalist and entrepreneur, and help stand up the Endeavor Canada office. So at the core, Endeavor Global has actually been around 25 years. This December will be our 25th anniversary. At the core, we are a nonprofit around the globe with 40 different markets, and we search and select and support high impact entrepreneurs in these 41 plus markets around the world. We are looking for those entrepreneurs that are thinking bigger and want to go bigger, and really catching them at that inflection point of growth, where we can come in through our support and the peer-to-peer network, this global network that we've established, and really truly 10x their growth from where they are.
You're unicorn hunting.
We are the up and coming unicorn hunting, right? So,
and how do you help support those entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so really what's unique about us is this isn't just one program fits all, right? So we go through a very proprietary selection process that we've established over these 25 years, where we're figuring out if we've caught this entrepreneur at the right time at that inflection point. But truly, we're looking at the entrepreneur. Is this an entrepreneur that has what it takes to grow this company and 10x its growth? So that's one aspect.
Is there a minimum revenue threshold that you're looking at? Do you have to be generating revenue?
Yeah, initially here in Canada, we've said that we would start these conversations with companies that have 5 million in annual recurring revenue. So that would be one of the key metrics. Obviously, looking at the entrepreneur, again, some entrepreneurs are happy with an exit at 100 million, but we're not. We're looking for those entrepreneurs because what we truly believe is when we select and support these high impact entrepreneurs, that they transform economies around the world. And in general, we're looking to put Canada on the map here with our high impact entrepreneurs. And what we look for is these entrepreneurs then that do look to pay it forward back into the ecosystem. And we believe there's a multiplier effect, and that those successful stories, those high impact entrepreneurs coming back into the ecosystem and mentoring and coaching other up and coming entrepreneurs that are at the earlier stages and working through those stages to get to that high impact growth.
And so do you leverage your network to help grow those revenues, to help accelerate that growth?
Yeah, so 41 plus countries, markets around the world, 25 years. We have over 2,300 selected Endeavor entrepreneurs. And it's really about that peer-to-peer connections, right? Of successful entrepreneurs that have done it, lived it, made the mistakes, and we facilitate them having those conversations to share in a trusted environment where they're having that conversation about, Chris, what should I be looking at to prepare for an IPO 2 years out? How do I attract that talent? Look at different market expansion. So yeah, it's really custom, and it's really at the core, the entrepreneur is always first. So we sit on the side of the entrepreneur, whether there's investors at the table, whatnot, we're there to support them and get them through those challenging growth times as they scale their businesses.
And so will you help facilitate conversations with potential investors as well?
We will. And one of the unique things that I was really excited about with Endeavor is 12 years ago, we actually started a venture fund, a rules-based venture fund that only co-invests alongside Endeavor selected entrepreneurs. And what we saw through that was, first, this was a philanthropic fund investing only in Endeavor selected entrepreneurs. And then fund 2, and now fund 3, and now we've just worked on closing. We're just about to close fund 4. And what we've seen is this ability for us to come alongside with those entrepreneurs and also expose them to our co-investors that exist outside. These are all the top tier venture capital, private equity firms, around the globe, the Sequoias, the Globants, the Tigers, and again, facilitating that introduction for them to lead that round or look at this high impact entrepreneur that, is looking to become a unicorn in 12 to 18 months. And again, through our support that's custom, that's high touch, looking at market expansions, different geographies around the world. And again, just having that ability to talk to somebody and others that have done that. We also obviously have, over 5,000 mentors and coaches around the world in these different markets.
So what you're really talking about is experience.
Yes.
And allowing for a supportive environment where people who haven't done it before can gain the benefit of the experience of those who have.
Right.
Right. Which is important, not just, for the entrepreneur, but for the whole organization that, that entrepreneur has created. And so what we're talking about is not so much the corporate model, but, some person with an idea that is having success, and then building a team around them, recognizing, kind of doing a diagnostic. What do you need? Do you have too many of something? If you do expand internationally, how do you do that? What do you look for? All of those things. So maybe we can talk a little bit about, that transition from entrepreneur to more of a supportive corporate model, where the entrepreneur's creativity and drive isn't too dampened, but allows for growth. And one of my favorite topics is governance. Rules. Mine too. You're looking at two guys who don't take instructions very well. Talking about having people who can follow instructions. Entrepreneurs are not very good at following instructions, which is why they, tend to have the success they have. As you grow, you do need to put some shape around your business, and you need to put practices and procedures in place to allow for that growth. And you can look at, local examples. Neo, for example, you see a lot of new people in the building here. And we should talk about remote working as well. How do you manage that growth? You need people to help build your business. They might not live in the same city. They might not have the same commitment level that the founding entrepreneur has. How do you channel that?
Yeah. I'll continue on the governance side, because love to share war stories. So as an entrepreneur, running a company for the first time, a true venture-backed business, was very excited to take this round of $45 million, close it, and then take a company from what ended up being myself to about 300 employees spread out around northern Alberta and British Columbia, northern BC, and and I quickly realized that, we weren't ready for the growth, right? We didn't have the structure and the foundation in place from a governance perspective. And so again, why I reached out to Chris to help us put some of those policies and things in place. But it definitely, I could see that we should have had that in place before, because it was a lot of sleepless nights and trying to navigate and deal with the things after the fact.
So it's interesting, because as you're running at 100 miles an hour, trying to grow the business, trying to get the work, get the contracts, support the business, a lot of those policies, procedures either didn't exist in the first place. And I'm not a fan of having them in place before you start to run. But as you, kind of start to run, you need to be thoughtful about those. And I think it's actually okay to take stuff off the shelf. It doesn't need to be super customized right away. But it's really hard to channel everybody's energy and keep everybody on track, because sometimes there's a tendency to go off track. And when folks go off track, you need a way to bring them back into the lane. And without those policies and procedures, especially as you grow from 0 to 300, it's really hard to get them back in the lane. And I'm not saying policies and procedures would have, helped you or prevented you from achieving that growth.
Right.
But it's certainly a better way to manage growth. And you just need to be mindful of it. You can't really prepare for it, but you should know that you have to put those things in place at the appropriate time.
Right.
And that's the key, is knowing how quickly have we grown? Is it the right time now? Is it, at 5 employees, 10 employees? That's pretty manageable.
Right.
300? That's harder.
Yeah. So challenges for sure. But yeah, on the people front, I mean, if I look back over this 22-year career, it's been really interesting to see how the workforce has evolved. And, now where I'm at, I've got a small team of 4. And I've really sort of, taken that opportunity to learn what makes an organization, synchronized and a high performer. And that's something, from an old school perspective is like, what do you mean you're not in the office Monday to Friday or 6 days a week? And so I can see now, even as we're looking at these, scaling high growth companies around the world, just how different they're thinking about this. And there's still some challenges around this in recruiting that talent. But I truly believe that people is the number one asset that you need for your company to be successful. So you need to figure out how to set the clear expectations and manage those. So it's about that communication and grounded that, listen, you know what, we've got a deadline here. We need, everything drafted and done by this date. And once that's done, yeah, if you want to take off at 3:00 on a Friday and have an extra, day off, I'm all for that.
So that's great, Chris. Sounds like you'd be a great guy to work for. People are people, and things happen in people's lives that sometimes take them away from work,
Right.
or they become distracted, and significant life events, marriage, divorce, death, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
How do you manage some of those people issues?
Mhm. Again, I think it starts with trust. Trust is not given, trust is earned. And so it's a two-way, right, communication. And again, I'm brutally honest in a good way or a bad way. And when things aren't going right, I think you don't want to sit there and dwell on that. You got to have that hard conversation immediately when that situation happens, to clear what the expectations are with that employee, with whatever they're dealing with. And obviously it's challenging because there's a balance that you've got, expectations from your investors and the business and sales and targets.
And as a leader in your organization, should you be thinking about a plan B always?
Yes.
In case plan A
Yes.
doesn't succeed?
Yes. And again, you're looking at, as you scale these businesses in different departments, is there a short-term fix or something that you need to consider more long-term?
So people are number one, regardless of whether you're construction company building things, tech company with a team of developers. Businesses don't run on their own.
No.
Right. Even trading bots need to be coded and developed and maintained. And so people are number one. Finding the right people to support the entrepreneur and the organization are critical. What about advisors? Because you don't need a lawyer on staff full time.
Right.
You do need sometimes an accountant full time,
right?
CFO type or a controller, at least initially.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look to grow those teams, whether they're internal or external advisors, and what's the right? How do you know when you found the right fit?
Right. I'd actually put one in front of that I learned over the years, that maybe I wasn't focused on initially, but now I can really see how important this is no matter where you are in the stage of your business, sales is number one. And the minute you lose focus on that, thinking that you've got this 40,000 foot vision that we're going to be, X revenue and this number of people, and this is what we're doing, as the CEO or the president of your organization, you need to make sure that the sales that you have those exponential, quarter over quarter increasing in sales. So on that, I also then would look strategically at my team, whether it's advisors, to help me, implement new sales strategies or expand into new markets. I mean, interesting conversation I've had with some other people, and I think you and I talked about it, was, in Canada in general, the market here is pretty small, right, around the globe. And so some really high impact entrepreneurs were talking about, what is the Canadian playbook here in Canada for an entrepreneur? I was like, well, tell me more. Like, I'm really curious, because I've been through a few of these and lots of business scars. And yes, a couple of small exits, but no IPO or anything in my time frame in my career yet. But they look at this Canadian playbook, and they're actually talking about team here, market there, and meaning market there is our neighbors, the US. And
as a primary market.
And so I look at, if I'm building out my team and advisors, mentors, people that can give me access to those networks, and opportunities for, the decision makers of what it is my product or service is that I have in the US, I would truly start to focus on that from an expansion plan that can take that growth and accelerate it quite quickly if you're focused on those sales in
And
that
so
other
are
market.
you looking to hire advisors or a sales team? How do you go about that
Yeah.
when you're not there on the ground? If your team is here,
Right,
how do you hire the right people
right,
to help sell your business?
right. Again, it's created by culture, right? You've set the culture here. You should have that foundation built on what it is that we're looking to do with sales. And again, the strategy around that. Are we looking for channel partners? Are we looking for people boots on the ground in these markets where they're out knocking on doors or making, obviously now it's a very unique time where you can actually, I think it is a very unique time for salespeople and business development people, because Zoom has given you that ability to connect with, I think, more people, but you have to be very, very good at video sales. I'm still struggling with this ability to pitch Endeavor or my businesses through a digital platform. I grew up where it was in-person communication and you could read those, body language. And I became very, very good at that, but I've had to really adapt and be a life learner around how to do those digital sales online. So again, what is your strategy? What type of person am I looking for? To be honest, I think that, in today's world, I think we're starting to open up. There's a bit of a hybrid as far as digital sales or online sales versus the in-person.
So here's a question for you. If you have the chance to get the number one salesperson, but they happen to be in Florida and your office in the US is in LA, do you take that person
Yes.
over culture in the local
Yes.
office?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Today's market, I mean, to be honest, I've really, again, as an old school guy in sales and business development, I'm looking for that top performer, right? To accelerate that growth.
And how do you manage top performance with things like diversity and ESG considerations?
Right.
Where's the balance, or
Right.
is there a balance, or when you're starting out, can you do it all? Can you have it all?
I think there is a focus point. Again, I'm really, really about diversity and inclusion here at Endeavor, and the company for 25 years has supported that. I mean, most of our markets that we expanded into were underserved, right? And not giving everybody an equal opportunity. So looking at that top performer, what is it that makes that individual that top performer? Is it that they have the network? Is it that they have those skills, the tools? Is it their attitude? What is it that makes that individual who they are?
So let's say you've picked up the top performer, you've accelerated sales. How do you scale that? How do you build a team?
Right.
Because that's really what's going to accelerate growth for
Right.
you. It can't just be one person,
No.
and one other entrepreneur. It's
Right.
it's got to be scaled.
Right. And again, looking at the complexities of a sales team, and again, depending on where your services are, what is the target customers? What verticals are you chasing? You're seeing a lot of these SaaS platforms and software companies that are, looking to get in telecoms. Well, that's a very, very long sales cycle from my understanding of what to get into. So within that, the sales cycles, I think, are important to understand what is it that makes up that sales team, and the different verticals, whether it's banking, retail, whatever it is your product and services are looking, you really got to build that team out around that.
Okay, I'm just going to interrupt you there. We've got a question from Brenda. What learnings have you taken from the pandemic, and how will you use those learnings to evolve your leadership style? As an old school guy, you keep saying you're old.
I am old. I'm about to turn 50 next year. Look at the shirt matches the hair.
Can you change? You can change the color of your hair. You can change your shirt, but can you change your behavior? Can you still learn, and how quickly can you adapt to put those lessons to good use?
Yeah, I think you really got to look yourself in the mirror and realize that the world is evolving, and you need to be agile, and you need to be flexible. And, my parents and those generations, I mean, even today, it's a challenging relationship because they're very set in their ways, right? And what do you mean I should be worried about my health or fitness? Like, I'm fine just sitting in my chair, and yeah, that kind of hurts, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Whereas me as a, in the position I'm in today and talking to these high impact entrepreneurs, it is about being a life learner. And I think you have to be vulnerable. You have to reach out to people, even like yourself, and get different opinions and formulate, educate, build that knowledge around what's the trends, what's happening.
So just to bring it back to our theme, we talking about transitions. And so the pandemic was a real opportunity to transition how business gets done, how we communicate with each other, and from a leadership perspective, not being afraid to fail. So trying new things. In the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, there was a real need locally here for people who had no idea what was happening. How do I do it down? We organized in very short order a Zoom session. It's probably the last time I had my camera on, actually, because I got bored with Zoom very quickly. You need to pivot very quickly, and you can't be afraid to fail. And so you try new things, put it out there, see what works, but also be listening for the feedback and the gift that comes back to you, which is, that was terrible, that was unhelpful, you need to do this better. That wasn't our full review, but it was, hey, you guys threw effort, we need to make this better. And so how do you take that feedback from your customers, from your advisors, and without taking it personally to grow?
Well, I have an interesting story, an example again of when I took on this role and been really trying to educate myself around vacation policies. And all these tech companies down in the valley, unlimited vacations. Well, sounds great. Like, what is that? And so I've actually implemented this with Endeavor Canada, and several of our offices, and Endeavor Global has this at the global level out of New York. And it was really hard for me. And I haven't implemented it for myself with my chair. I've implemented it with my staff. And again, it's about trust and building that trust in the communication that, listen, we have a deadline, we have a project. That doesn't mean that in the middle of that you're going to put your hand up and say, I need a day off, right? Obviously things come up and there's a situation that needs to be dealt with. And so I'm flexible around that. But here's what's interesting is I actually think it has increased the productivity and the efficiency at a small scale. I'm a team of 4 around implementing this, that we get more work done in those first 3-4 days of the week. And again, the cycles of when the projects and the works and the entrepreneurs are getting onboarded determines, when we have more flexibility to take that, when those staff have the ability to take the day off. But I'll tell you, it's still a year later is extremely challenging for me around implementing this unlimited vacation policy that I have.
And that's going to be difficult to manage when things like right to not receive electronic communications rules and laws come into place. And so if the expectation is you get to take time off whenever you want, but you're kind of available in order to accomplish certain projects, it's going to be hard to mitigate those things.
Right.
And so that's where I think culture becomes the glue. If everybody is rowing in the same direction, you can accomplish those things. If you have huge growth and many people working at the same time, it's really hard to manage that. I'm losing track of their own productivity. So
how have you changed? And here's a traditional.
I got better looking. That's how I changed.
A question to you: like, what's changed in the legal practice or around dealing with your clients?
So client expectations have changed. I think my practice style has changed a little bit. My dress style has deteriorated to a degree that I'm on from a business perspective.
That's so true. I'm the same.
From a business perspective, though, it is about flexibility. We want to have a call at this time. Who do we actually need on that call? What does that look like? It is much more project based, and that's kind of always the way I've liked to work. Modes of communication have changed, and so before the pandemic started, nobody had heard of all of these kind of work platforms like Teams. Whereas now people are using those tools for different things, and the intended purpose has changed. So that's interesting. I don't think from a client perspective, the expectations have changed. And because we are in the service industry, our goal is to support our clients in whatever way, shape, or form that may be. And what has really changed is the inability to get together, to have that face-to-face and build that relationship. And so you have to be much more, I guess, attuned to your client's needs than you were before, because to have a conversation over Zoom or Teams is really hard to get a sense for what somebody's really asking you. It's easier, I think, to have more difficult conversations, but the impact of those difficult conversations is also harder to manage. And so you have to be a better communicator, a better learner when you're using those electronic modes of communication, as opposed to being together in person. From a transition perspective, I found it actually quite difficult, and I underestimated the impact of the pandemic, moving firms in terms of dealing with clients who were also transitioning to a new firm, but also trying to find the right resources within my new firm to support those clients. So specialty regulatory advice, tax advice, it takes a little while to figure out, go through the Rolodex or the website and figure out who you should be talking to, and then finding the right fit for your clients to help support them. So as we were growing into the States, and there's one tech client in particular, finding the right, very specific form of agreement, I spent more time doing that than it would have taken to actually review that agreement. And so the work changed a little bit, and you just have to be open to that.
So just adding on, we talked about, team and talent and sales. Another huge aspect of obviously preparing yourself towards, transitioning to the next stage. We've gone through this many times with, raising capital for different entities that I've been involved in. What are some highlights or some comments around what should that look like at those certain stages, and what should you be considering as you're raising that capital?
So for everyone that's still with us, you've noticed that we've transitioned. Chris is now asking me questions, and
we always do.
I'm expected to answer. So we've talked a lot about the people, and then some about the policies. Your capital structure will make it easier or harder for you to raise your next round. And so as you're negotiating and you're looking at a B or C round, and you're on that growth curve, your A round is really important, because it's going to determine how easy or hard it is to bring in new rights, usually some kind of priority right, special voting rights, maybe a different class of shares. And so right from the outset, you should take a look at what your share capital structure looks like, with a view to additional growth. So if you've just got one class of common shares, that may be preferable from a governance and a shareholder agreement perspective. But if you talk to any VC or private equity player, they're going to want preferred shares, and they're going to want some governance rights. And
just because
some rules
you get money from them, does that give them a board seat?
Not always. No, and it depends on how much.
Yeah.
I've got larger clients where some of the folks who've written the biggest checks don't want a board seat. They don't want to be involved in governance. They don't need to, have that level of oversight and control. And it's almost worse because for the entrepreneur, they know where their next check is coming from, and they know that if they don't stay in that lane, the bear will come and hunt them down. And so, it really depends on the culture you've built, on the relationships you have with your investors, and it all comes down to trust. So if the investor trusts you and you're staying in your lane, doing your job, executing, and not getting distracted by all the different things that you can see along the way, I think things are fine, whether you've got board seats or not as an investor. If the check is large enough, you should be having a discussion about board seats. How many? Who's going to fill that seat? Is that the investor themselves, or is it some third-party appointee?
Right.
You can't just agree to a board seat without knowing who's going to fill it.
So thinking of, I love flipping the conversation here and asking Chris, because I actually know the answers, because a lot of this has been from my time with Chris over the last 15 or so years. And so what about when you're looking at your cap table and you're transitioning through these growth stages, and you're getting closer at looking at planning for, maybe it's 18, 24 months out, and there is the possibility of an IPO. When is the right time to deal with the cap table and anything that's a little strange on the cap table?
It's whenever there's a check on the table or you're talking about a significant check. So generally, so all of my startups start with common shares and preferred shares as a class. At each successive round, you'll have to review the structure of your cap table, and it'll be a negotiation with whoever's writing the check as to not just what rights they have, but what percentage ownership they have vis-a-vis the other classes. And so as a founder or entrepreneur, you dislike dilution, but you recognize it's a necessary element of growth. There is a balance there, and that's part of where advisors come in, where mentors come in to say, look, you are going to be diluted. There's a smart way of going about this, and you don't want to give up too much, but you do want the right investors at the table, and they have certain expectations. Sometimes you can moderate those or blow those up if the business is hot enough, if the growth curve is high enough, but generally speaking, your negotiation ability is somewhat limited, and it just depends on where you are in the growth cycle, how much revenue you're generating, and frankly, what your valuation expectations are, right? If your valuation of the business up here, you have to make that up. It's a negotiation.
Flip it back to you. Any other questions?
What's from a accelerating growth perspective and looking at an IPO, you can set up your cap structure accordingly. That's going to get blown up when you take it public, because all those pref shares are going to have to convert likely. You're going to be listing your common shares. When is not doing an IPO appropriate? When is it okay to say no?
I mean, it's interesting to see what's happening out right in some of these markets and what's happening. When your burn rate is too high, right, and you're not controlling that, and the sales, don't support it. I mean, there's a time there where you have to realize that, listen, we're looking for accelerated growth, and we think that the right answer is to go public. I think you got to take a pause, a breath, again, reach out to those mentors, those advisors, your legal support, and say, you know what, it's okay to take a pause here and relook at this, but trying to, go out and raise more money, to just raise money to take it an IPO, I think is a really a dangerous slippery slope, right, of where you can end up.
I guess it really depends on why you're looking at the IPO as an exit. True. Because it's not an exit. No, you're still holding the stock. The stock may or may not be liquid. You may or may not get the valuation you're looking for, and you may have significant restrictions on your ability to sell the stock in any event. Your primary investors are going to be driving for an exit. And unless there's somebody who could write a very large check, it's hard to imagine an exit that's kind of single source. So often it's staged, often there's a process that you can undertake. And so sometimes you're working on an exit process, a sale. At the same time, you're looking at an IPO so that you can create some tension between the two. That process can get expensive and confusing because you're dealing with potential buyers, you're dealing with potentially investment banks and other advisors who are trying to drive as quickly as possible down the IPO road. I guess it's okay to say no when things are moving too quickly, and it makes it difficult to make good decisions and to take a breath is really what you're saying. So we've talked basically through the growth cycle now. What we haven't really talked about is geography and international growth. Endeavor's obviously an international phenomenon. How do you see and how do you look at Canadian businesses that are looking to accelerate growth internationally? Is that a good thing? Is it better to deal in North America first? How do you view Europe, Africa, Asia? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it depends on the business, right? In what the services or the products and what you're looking at, of where those geographies make sense. A lot of, looking at Latin America, and there's a lot of really tough regulatory, policies and things that are in place there. So you really, again, through the mentorship, the coaching, the access to these other peers, we have that ability to have those or set those conversations up with those entrepreneurs on the way they expanded into some of those countries.
You're not doing this for the first time, right?
No.
You don't want to reinvent the wheel. No. You want to avoid some of those mistakes that other people have made.
Right.
You're not necessarily going to be able to buy the sport tire either.
But I also think, again, going back to that earlier conversation around the Canadian playbook, as an entrepreneur and looking to scale your business by that 10x growth, yes, there's a market here. It's a great market to test things, a beta, and look where we're going to start to commercialize some service or some product or some softwares. And what I think immediately you got to get down to the United States. That market, is 30 times what we are, whatever the numbers are now. And I think, again, having that ability to prove what you're doing can be successful and can be commercialized there gives you that ability then, and you got to hone that market. You got to do that well before now you starting to expand into these other markets, whether it's UK or Asia.
And do you think you need to open satellite offices there? There's sometimes a legal requirement for a presence. But do you have to have a physical presence somewhere?
No, not necessarily. No, I think this remote first workforce, again, has given us that ability. And you may come across somebody that's in Florida that, happens to know those customer channels or markets there in Asia or wherever they are. So I think you really, again, getting out of your heads, thinking about strategy, sales strategy, growth strategy, you have to look at what makes sense. And I don't necessarily believe you absolutely have to have somebody on the ground in those new markets.
Okay, we do have another question from Zach. In terms of international orientation, do you have any comments on engaging with governments who want to support Canadian companies when by their name will create jobs and economic activity everywhere, not just in Alberta, but other jurisdictions? And we talked a little bit about this in preparing very briefly for the session this morning. With government both here, who's looking to export Canadian products.
Who's on the webinar?
You should assume that everyone's watching.
Yeah. I really think you have to evaluate the input, meaning your time and the resources that you're putting into this effort.
Because sometimes there's a cost to participating in those missions.
Yes, and time is your most valuable asset that you have as an entrepreneur, as a company, and in general. I think we've all realized in life, right? And going through the pandemic, and what is the output? What is the output that I'm looking for? Relationships with, somebody in Shanghai, and they have that ability to connect us, similar to, again, what we're doing with Endeavor is connecting these high impact entrepreneurs together to have these we facilitate a lot of our online gatherings, our outliers groups. They have these intimate, closed door, trusted conversations, sharing what they've been through. So I think these trade missions, I think you just really have to be careful what it is, at what stage you're at. You might be too early to be thinking, and then you get distracted from truly what you should be focused on, whether it's those sales in the US or what's happening in your company. Do not take your finger off the pulse on your company.
So good question. And a great example is local client here in the medical device space.
Yes.
They are in the process of really tackling the US market and expanding their growth there and taking things to the next level. They have had orders from Europe and Asia, and they've determined that while they can satisfy some of those orders, they're not going to go out of their way to clear a device from a medical board in some jurisdictions, because the time and energy it would take to make that sale that has come to them may be too much when you're already cleared in the US and in Europe, and you haven't quite satiated that market yet. And so supporting sales in a jurisdiction where you're already established for sales takes less time and energy. Mm-hmm. Not to mention shipping costs and other business costs. And so it really is about your specific circumstance. Does this make sense for the business? Is this a target market that we want to be in? What is the size of that market? What are the relationships that might come from engaging with a government here or a government there? Governments don't move at the same pace as business.
No.
And so your expectations need to be adjusted accordingly as well. They're large organizations and they have different interests. Another client who, and this is a good example, got a reasonable sized contract from a government agency, and that agency has not been able to sign off on that agreement for a very long time. And the business has had to focus its interests and people elsewhere while they're waiting for the proper approvals. Mm-hmm. You can't sustain an infrastructure to support a government contract if that government contract gets delayed for very long. Mm-hmm. And so you need to find other sources of revenue and other activities to undertake while you're doing that. So when you're dealing with government, it can be very different than dealing with another private enterprise. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've gone through really kind of the conceptual items that I wanted to touch on. Anything else from your perspective, Chris?
No, I think, again, as you scale and you're going through these stages, again, it's about building out the foundation. It's like building any house or cabin. I mean, if the foundation is off, the structure is off, right? And the growth opportunity to build upon that. And so I think, you do need to evaluate what operating systems you're implementing for admin. Be careful, I've seen there's so many, I mean, I even find it right now with Endeavor. I think I've got 20 apps on my phone that are supposed to make me more productive and more efficient every day. And I seriously maybe use 2. Even communication within your group and your organizations, we have WhatsApp, we have Slack. I'm interested, do you guys use Slack at Denton?
I don't. I have clients that use it. I think a lot of people have moved depending on your security needs, right, to Signal. Yeah. And, so there's a million different options.
Yeah.
You need to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and stick with it until it doesn't work for you anymore. Yeah. And then look for alternatives.
And again, the cost to the benefit, I think, looking at even cybersecurity, which has been a big topic as of late and will be, I think, for the foreseeable future. I think that's an area that I am not an expert in at all. So I'd reach out to my advisors, my legal counsel, and support and figure out, what are the strategies around this that's, because I've seen some of these systems implemented into these organizations, and it's very, very costly. And again, there's still opportunities where they can get hacked or set them up with different scenarios. So yes, just talking again, we touched on a little bit is your board construction, and we talked about it, that just because you get a check from this individual doesn't mean that they necessarily need to be on the board. But I have to say, one of the biggest tools in my toolbox as an entrepreneur was the makeup of my board. And I'd say the first 3 or 4 times I did not get it right. But I'd say the last time it was a great group. It was smaller and more impactful. And I was very specific looking at the diversity and the experience that I was looking for on this board, and what that led up to the small eggs that we had with the success we had.
And is that because of the relationships that they were able to bring to bear, or because they worked well together as a group and gave you good advice, or both?
Both, all of the above. Yeah, it was really, it was that opportunity that they were fully engaged. They were there when I needed them, to ask them a question. If they didn't have the answer, they would reach out and into their network and provide that. Again, that's something here as Endeavor, we evolved. We're just coming up a year. We're entrepreneurs. Hanif and Tiffany with cement, local Calgary company, scaling extremely rapidly. We've actually got them in our Outliers program, which is our top 10% of our entire portfolio of Endeavor. So really about, long-term planning, word construction, new investors, all those different things. It just makes me reflect on, what that relationship was like at that stage, and how it did help us create that successful story and the small exit that we had.
Which is a good point, and one we can really finish on, subject to any other questions from online. As you accelerate growth, as you scale up, your needs are going to change, and your behavior should change. If it doesn't, and you're still doing the things you did with 10 employees when you're at 1,000 employees, your board with scale, and you need to be sensitive to that, create a new path, but that path needs to be safe for everybody to walk on. And so it really is about, transitioning and making sure that at each pivot point, you're making good decisions, and, have good advisors who can help you make good decisions. It doesn't mean you're always getting advice you like, but does mean you're open to it. Mm-hmm. And so any concluding remarks?
Well, next
Chris?
time we should have just done it. We should have just did it, but we got to wear our t-shirts. Like, I'm not that comfortable in the collared shirt.
We'll be down to shirts and t-shirts, or shorts and t-shirts in no time.
Yeah.
And last time it was a couch. This time we've got chairs.
I feel like we're on the TSN set here. Like, we just need some sports highlights, and we're all good. Death Star doesn't quite fit the theme, but
that's okay. I'm not great with statistics, so I'll leave the sports analysis to you.
Yeah.
So subject to any other questions we've got coming in from online, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate the time that you've taken to spend with us, and hope that this session's been helpful and insightful. And Chris and I are both open to feedback, but more than that, engaging with any of you after the fact. So thank you, and thanks very much to my guest, Chris Buckman.
Thank you for having me. So just highlight, do we have contact info going out then on the webinar, or should I mention how they can
You go ahead.
Yeah, so the Canadian Endeavor website, there's a link there to contact my team, www.endeavororg.com. And I'd be happy to connect with any of you and have a conversation with our team. So look forward to hearing from you all.
Yeah. So thanks very much, and have a great day, everyone.